My best friend Jake was soon to pick me up for a 4-day hunt, so I had to say goodbye to my wife, Liz. Jake loaded his pickup truck with all the necessary hunting gear, ensuring that preparation was key to success. He opened the locking drawer behind the cab, and I placed my rifle in the box next to his, along with my gear bag and a plastic box attached to the side. I climbed into the cab and took another look at the porch, where Liz stood, waving us off. The front door was closed as Jake pulled out of the driveway and headed toward the highway. We quickly made our way to an old cabin that had been in Jake's family for generations. The current owner was his Uncle Bob, but Bob was no longer able to get around, and Jake had become the primary user and caretaker. He had made significant improvements over the past few years, including better insulation and installing a more efficient wood stove, so we didn't have to huddle in parkas all the time. For this season, he had installed a satellite dish that not only broadcasted many channels but also provided internet. There's still no reliable cell coverage here, Jake said as he presented the upgrade, but you can use WhatsApp over Wi-Fi if you want to call Liz. You know she doesn't expect a lot of contact, and I like to be out of touch sometimes, I replied. So, I guess I won't tell her about the internet being here just yet. We watched SportsCenter over dinner, and then I settled in with a John Sanford novel while Jake sat on his laptop. We were both sipping beers, but it was only the second of two for the evening. We weren't stereotypical yahoos just off on a drunken boy outing free of our wives. We actually wanted to test ourselves against nature and hopefully refill our freezers with venison. Oh, crap! Jake exclaimed suddenly. I closed my book but kept my finger on the page, looking at him expectantly. Jake's eyes were still fixed on the screen, clearly reading something shocking. Holy double crap, he muttered, then tore his gaze away from the screen and stared at me with a vacant-eyed look of doubt, as if he shouldn't have addressed me. I put my finger in the book to keep my place and asked, "What's up? You look like you've seen a ghost." Jake hesitated, then sighed. "You'll have to see for yourself," he said, turning the laptop 90 degrees so it was facing the empty chair to his right. I rose from the shabby chair, crossed the dining room table and sat down, shifting my gaze to the screen, expecting to see a horrifying headline. It wasn't a news site. It was some kind of social networking site. On the screen was a picture of a smiling Liz. I looked up at Jake, confused. "What the hell is this?" "Sorry, Mike, but it's a dating site," he replied helplessly. "A dating site?" It didn't fit in my head. "Look," Jake said, "you know that after Tracy and I broke up, I was in deep crap. For 6 months or more, I just sat around with nothing to do, barely holding a pen. I started checking Tinder and other sites to meet people, meet women. So some of these sites kind of skip the dating and go straight to the fun stuff," Jake continued, his voice lightening. "I did manage to get laid a few times, but there are wives on there too." "Wives?" I repeated, my gut twitching. "Well, yes, there are a few wives and a lot of husbands who are looking for some fun on the side." I looked at the screen again. Further down the page was another picture of Liz. My gut churned. "Hey, Mike, let me tell you something," Jake said, nodding toward the laptop. "I've come across fake profiles more than once. Profiles that use a woman's name and image without her knowledge. Liz could be a victim. I mean, I've never seen her here or on any other site before." I mentally grasped at that straw, examining the profile more closely. The photos definitely belonged to Liz, but could they have been hacked from our own computer? The photo with the sly smile looked familiar to me. Then I noticed one detail that stabbed me in the heart: the outfit she was wearing in the second photo. The entire outfit cost almost $100, a gift I had bought for her last Christmas. That picture was less than a year old. I started reading the profile text. "Can you help me with my daddy issues? And I don't mean sugar daddy. I'm pretty sure my dad has wanted to, for a long time, but he hasn't yet. But I keep thinking about what it would have been like." Jake shifted uncomfortably as I continued reading, my heart sinking deeper with each word. The details were explicit, and they left no room for doubt. This was Liz, and she was actively seeking out other men. I looked up at Jake, feeling a mix of anger and betrayal. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Look, Mike," Jake said gently, "maybe it's not what it looks like. Maybe there's more to it. But you need to talk to her. You need to find out the truth." We sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of the situation sinking in. Jake broke the silence. "We came here to hunt and clear our heads. Maybe we should stick to that plan for now. We can deal with this when we get back." I nodded, knowing he was right. We couldn't solve this here, and the woods were calling. We needed this time away from everything, even if the peace of mind it once promised was now shattered. The morning air was crisp and filled with the scent of pine as we set out from the cabin. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a golden hue over the landscape. Jake and I hiked silently through the forest, the quiet only broken by the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. My mind was still reeling from the discovery of Liz's profile, but I tried to focus on the hunt. We reached a clearing where Jake had set up a makeshift blind. He motioned for me to take my position while he set up a small camp stove to brew some coffee. As I settled in, I tried to push thoughts of Liz from my mind, focusing instead on the surroundings. The rustling leaves, the distant call of a bird, the anticipation of spotting a deer. These were the things I needed to immerse myself in. Jake handed me a steaming cup of coffee, and we sat in companionable silence, scanning the tree line. The peacefulness of the moment was a stark contrast to the turmoil in my mind. I sipped my coffee, letting the warmth spread through me. Mike, you okay? Jake's voice broke the silence. Yeah, I lied. Not ready to delve into my feelings. Just need to clear my head. Jake nodded, understanding. He knew that pushing me wouldn't help. We finished our coffee and resumed our watch, the silence between us filled with unspoken support. Hours passed with no sign of deer. The forest remained quiet, almost as if it was mirroring my internal struggle. As the sun climbed higher, we decided to move to a new location. We packed up our gear and trekked deeper into the woods, our movements synchronized from years of hunting together. We finally found a promising spot near a stream. The sound of running water was soothing, and I felt a small measure of peace. Jake set up his equipment while I found a comfortable spot to sit, my rifle ready. As I waited, my thoughts inevitably drifted back to Liz. How could she do this? Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I thought we were happy. The image of her smiling face on that dating site kept flashing in my mind, and I felt a fresh wave of anger and betrayal. Jake must have sensed my distraction because he came over and sat beside me. Mike, you know you can talk to me, right? We've been through a lot together. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. I don't know where to start, Jake. I feel like my whole world just got turned upside down. Liz, she was everything to me. Jake nodded, his expression serious. I get it, man. It's a hell of a thing to find out, but you need to talk to her. Get her side of the story. Maybe there's more to it. I don't even know if I can look at her right now, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. You have to, Jake said firmly. If there's any chance of saving your marriage, you need to hear her out. And if there isn't, well, at least you'll know the truth. We sat in silence for a while longer, the weight of his words settling over me. I knew he was right, but the thought of confronting Liz filled me with dread. The rest of the day passed in a blur. We moved from spot to spot, but my heart wasn't in the hunt. By the time we returned to the cabin, the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the landscape. Jake busied himself with preparing dinner, giving me space to process my thoughts. As we ate, Jake tried to lighten the mood, recounting stories from past hunts and shared adventures. I appreciated his efforts, but my mind was elsewhere. After dinner, we settled in front of the fire, sipping beers and watching the flames dance. Mike, no matter what happens, you have people who care about you, Jake said, breaking the silence. We'll get through this, one way or another. I nodded, grateful for his support. Thanks, Jake. I don't know what I'd do without you. He clapped me on the shoulder. That's what friends are for. That night, I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling. Sleep was elusive as my mind raced with thoughts of Liz and what I would say to her. I knew I couldn't avoid the conversation forever, but the thought of facing her felt like an insurmountable challenge. The next morning, we rose early and packed up our gear. The hunt was over, and it was time to return to reality. As we drove back to the city, I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my chest. The serene forest seemed like a distant memory as we approached the suburban sprawl. Jake dropped me off at my house, and I stood on the porch, staring at the front door. The house looked the same as it always had, but it no longer felt like home. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Liz was in the living room, her face lighting up when she saw me. Mike, you're back. How was the hunt? I set my gear down, avoiding her gaze. We need to talk, Liz. Her smile faltered, and she nodded, understanding the gravity of my tone. Okay, let's sit down. We moved to the couch, and I finally looked at her, searching her eyes for some sign of the woman I thought I knew. I saw your profile on a dating site, Liz. I need to know why. Her eyes widened in shock and then filled with tears. Mike, I can explain. And so began the conversation I had been dreading. As Liz spoke, I listened, trying to make sense of the betrayal and searching for a way forward. Whether or not we could salvage our marriage remained to be seen, but I knew that this was the first step toward finding the truth. Liz's face was a portrait of shock and fear as she sat on the couch, her hands nervously wringing together. The silence between us was deafening, the air thick with tension. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart and calm the anger bubbling just below the surface. Mike, I never wanted you to find out like this, Liz started, her voice trembling. It's not what you think. Then what is it, Liz? I demanded, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty bad. She looked down at her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. It's complicated. I've been feeling so lost and disconnected. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. Lost and disconnected? I echoed, incredulous. So you thought creating a profile on a dating site was the solution? It wasn't about finding someone else, she insisted. I never met anyone from the site. It was just an escape, a way to feel something different. Feel something different? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Liz, we're married. If you're feeling lost, you talk to me. We work through it together. I know, she sobbed. I know I should have, but I was scared. Scared you'd think less of me, that you'd leave me. I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Liz, you should have trusted me. Instead, you betrayed me. She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. Mike, please. I love you. I don't want to lose you. Her words stung, but they also softened something inside me. I took another deep breath, trying to see through the haze of my emotions. Liz, I need to understand. Why did you feel this way? What went wrong? She wiped her tears and took a shaky breath. It started a few months ago. You were so busy with work, and I felt like we were drifting apart. I didn't know how to reach out to you, and I guess I started feeling invisible. I listened, the anger slowly giving way to a painful understanding. Liz, I'm sorry if I made you feel that way, but going behind my back like this, it's hard to forgive. I know, and I'm sorry, she whispered. I just want a chance to make it right. I stood up, needing to put some distance between us. I paced the room, my mind racing. I don't know if we can just go back to the way things were. Trust has been broken. She nodded, her eyes filled with sorrow. I understand, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. Counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. I stopped pacing and looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. Part of me wanted to believe her, to hope that we could find a way through this. But another part of me was still reeling from the betrayal, unsure if I could ever fully move past it. We'll need time, I said finally. We can't just pretend this didn't happen. We need to face it, deal with it head on. Liz nodded eagerly. Yes, of course. I'm willing to do that, Mike. I want to do that. I sat back down, feeling exhausted. We'll start with counseling. See where it takes us. But I need you to understand that this is going to be a long, hard road. I understand, she said, her voice filled with hope. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for giving us a chance. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. It was a tentative step toward healing, but it was a step nonetheless. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and there were no guarantees, but I owed it to our marriage to try. The next day, I made an appointment with a marriage counselor. Liz and I attended the session together, both nervous and unsure of what to expect. The counselor, a kind woman named Dr. Harper, welcomed us warmly and began by asking us to share our sides of the story. Liz went first, explaining her feelings of isolation and fear. She talked about how she had felt neglected and invisible, and how creating the profile had been a misguided attempt to cope with those feelings. Dr. Harper listened patiently, nodding understandingly. When it was my turn, I spoke about the shock and betrayal I felt upon discovering Liz's profile. I talked about the anger and sadness that had consumed me, and my struggle to understand why she hadn't come to me first. Dr. Harper guided us through the conversation, helping us to see each other's perspectives and encouraging us to express our feelings honestly. It was a painful process, but it also felt like a necessary step toward healing. Over the next few weeks, we continued our sessions with Dr. Harper. There were moments of progress and moments of setback, but we were both committed to working through the issues. Liz was open and honest, and I tried to be patient and understanding, though it wasn't always easy. One evening, after a particularly intense session, Liz and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. The air was cool, and the sky was painted with hues of orange and pink. For the first time in a long while, there was a sense of calm between us. Mike, Liz said softly, breaking the silence, I know I've hurt you deeply, and I know it's going to take time to rebuild the trust, but I want you to know that I'm committed to this. To us. I looked at her, seeing the determination in her eyes. I appreciate that, Liz.
Ido.
And I'm committed too. But we have to take it one day at a time. She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. One day at a time. As the days turned into weeks, we slowly began to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments of doubt and pain, but there were also moments of hope and connection. We learned to communicate better, to be more open and honest with each other. There was no guarantee that we would succeed, but we were both willing to try. And in the end, that willingness to fight for our marriage, to face the challenges head-on, was what gave me hope. The journey was far from over, but it was a start. And as we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a glimmer of optimism for the future. The weeks following our initial confrontation were filled with a roller coaster of emotions and difficult decisions. While Liz and I were making progress in counseling, the reality of the situation loomed over us like a dark cloud. I knew we needed to take legal steps to protect ourselves, no matter where our relationship was headed. One morning, I sat in the office of Kelly Anderson, a highly recommended family lawyer. Kelly was a no-nonsense professional, known for her expertise and tenacity in family law. Her office was neat and organized, with a wall lined with books on legal precedent and family court cases. Mike, it's good to meet you, Kelly began, extending her hand. I've reviewed the details you provided. This is a complex situation, but it's not insurmountable. Thank you, Kelly, I replied, shaking her hand. I appreciate your help. I'm not sure what the best course of action is, but I know I need to protect myself and my interests. Absolutely, Kelly agreed, motioning for me to sit. Let's start by discussing your options. Given the infidelity and the emotional distress, you have grounds for a fault-based divorce. However, if reconciliation is still on the table, we might want to consider a legal separation agreement. I nodded, taking in her words. Liz and I are working on things through counseling, but I'm not sure if we can fully recover from this. What would a separation agreement entail? A legal separation agreement would allow you to live apart while remaining legally married, Kelly explained. It outlines the responsibilities and rights of each party during the separation period, including financial support, property division, and custody arrangements if children are involved. We don't have children, I said, feeling a pang of sadness as I thought about the family we had once dreamed of. But what about our house and finances? Kelly opened a file on her desk and scanned the documents. Given that you've been married for a significant period, the house and other marital assets would typically be divided equitably. This doesn't necessarily mean a 50-50th split, but rather what's fair based on various factors, including each party's contribution to the marriage and future earning potential. I leaned back in my chair, processing the information. I want to be fair, but I also want to make sure I'm not taken advantage of. Liz has her own job, and we've both contributed to the household. Kelly nodded, making notes. It's important to document everything. We'll need to compile a comprehensive list of assets and debts, as well as evidence of contributions from both sides. This will help us negotiate a fair agreement. As we continued discussing the legalities, Kelly's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and then back at me. Sorry, Mike. I need to take this call. It's related to another case. Please take a moment to review these documents while I step out. Kelly handed me a stack of papers, including a draft separation agreement and information on asset division. As I read through the documents, my mind drifted to Liz and our counseling sessions. Part of me wanted to believe we could work things out, but another part of me knew that trust, once broken, was incredibly difficult to rebuild. Kelly returned a few minutes later, her expression serious. Apologies for that. Now, where were we? Yes. The separation agreement. We spent the next hour going over the details, and Kelly explained the next steps. I'll draft the agreement based on what we've discussed and send it to Liz's attorney for review. It's crucial that we remain cooperative to avoid a lengthy and costly legal battle. Agreed, I said, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. Thank you, Kelly. I feel more confident knowing you're handling this. We'll get through this, Mike, she said reassuringly. Remember, the goal is to protect your interests and ensure a fair outcome. Leaving Kelly's office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The legal process was daunting, but having a competent lawyer on my side made it more manageable. I drove home, my mind swirling with thoughts of the future. That evening, Liz and I had another counseling session with Dr. Harper. As we sat in the cozy, dimly lit room, Dr. Harper guided us through our feelings and the progress we had made. Liz was visibly tense, and I couldn't blame her. The prospect of legal separation was daunting. Mike, Liz, Dr. Harper began, her voice calm and steady. You've both shown commitment to this process, which is commendable. Today, I'd like us to discuss the practical aspects of moving forward, whether that means reconciliation or separation. Liz glanced at me, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. Mike, I know we've had some tough conversations, and I appreciate your willingness to try. But I also understand if you feel that separation is the best option. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. Liz, I want us to have a chance, but we need to be realistic. Trust takes time to rebuild, and we need to protect ourselves legally in the meantime. She nodded, tears welling up. I understand. I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to make things worse by avoiding the reality of our situation. Dr. Harper interjected gently. Legal separation doesn't mean the end of your relationship. It provides a structured way to address your issues while maintaining a level of independence. It's a tool to help you both navigate this difficult time. We discussed the details of the separation agreement, and I explained what Kelly had advised. Liz listened attentively, her expression somber but resolute. By the end of the session, we had a clearer understanding of the path ahead. In the following days, Kelly worked diligently on the separation agreement, communicating with Liz's attorney to ensure everything was in order. Liz and I continued our counseling sessions, slowly rebuilding our communication and trust. One evening, as we sat on the porch again, Liz turned to me. Mike, I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'm grateful for the effort you're putting into this. I know I've hurt you deeply, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make amends. I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. I appreciate that, Liz, and I want you to know that I'm not giving up on us. But we need to take this one step at a time, and the separation agreement is part of that process. She nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. one step at a time. As we signed the separation agreement a week later, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. It was a step toward healing, but it also marked a significant change in our relationship. We were no longer the same couple we had once been, but we were both committed to finding a way forward. The legal maneuvering was a necessary part of this journey, providing a framework for us to address our issues and protect ourselves. With Kelly's guidance, I felt more equipped to navigate this challenging time, and I hoped that, in the end, we would emerge stronger and wiser. The ink had barely dried on our separation agreement, but the changes were already palpable. Liz and I were living apart, navigating the uncharted waters of our new reality. Our once shared home was now a place of memories, and I had moved into a modest condo downtown, seeking a fresh start. The first few weeks were challenging. Mornings felt empty without the familiar routine of breakfast with Liz, and nights were the hardest. The silence of my new condo was deafening, and I often found myself staring at the ceiling, haunted by the past. Yet, amidst the loneliness, there was also a sense of liberation, a chance to rediscover myself outside the shadow of our strained marriage. Counseling sessions with Dr. Harper continued, though now they were more focused on individual healing rather than reconciliation. Liz and I had agreed to a period of no contact, allowing us both the space to reflect and grow independently. It was during this time that I realized just how much I had lost touch with my own needs and desires. One evening, after a particularly introspective session with Dr. Harper, I decided to take a walk around my new neighborhood. The city lights glimmered, casting a warm glow on the streets. I found myself drawn to a small cafe that I had passed by several times but never entered. The sign above the door read, "New Horizons," and it felt like a fitting place to start anew. Inside, the atmosphere was cozy and inviting. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sound of soft jazz playing in the background. I ordered a cappuccino and found a seat by the window, watching the world go by. As I sipped my drink, I felt a sense of peace that had been elusive for so long. "Is this seat taken?" a voice asked, breaking my reverie. I looked up to see a woman about my age, with warm brown eyes and a friendly smile. "No, please, go ahead," I replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. "Thanks," she said, setting down her own coffee. "I'm Emma, by the way." "Mike," I introduced myself, offering a handshake. "Nice to meet you." We struck up a conversation, and I found myself relaxing for the first time in what felt like ages. Emma was easy to talk to, and our conversation flowed naturally from one topic to another. She told me about her work as a graphic designer and her love for art, while I shared my own passion for photography and the outdoors. As the evening wore on, I realized how much I had missed connecting with someone on a personal level. It wasn't just about finding a distraction from my troubles. It was about rediscovering the joy of human connection. When we finally said our goodbyes, we exchanged numbers with a promise to meet up again soon. The next few weeks brought a sense of renewal. I threw myself into my work with a newfound vigor, finding solace in the routine and challenges it provided. I also started running again, participating in local 5K races, and enjoying the physical exertion that helped clear my mind. Each day felt like a step toward healing, a gradual rebuilding of my life. Liz and I eventually resumed contact, but it was different now. Our conversations were respectful and cordial, focused on practical matters rather than emotional entanglements. She had moved into her own apartment and was also seeing a therapist. While the wounds of our past were still there, we were both committed to moving forward with our lives. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some old photos, I came across a picture of Liz and me from our early days together. We looked so happy, so full of hope and dreams for the future. It was a bittersweet moment, but it also reminded me of the good times we had shared. Despite everything, those memories were still a part of me. Feeling a sense of closure, I decided to box up the old photos and put them away. It was time to focus on the present and the future. I arranged the pictures I had taken during my recent outings around my condo, filling the space with new memories and aspirations. Emma and I continued to see each other, and our friendship blossomed into something more. She was a breath of fresh air, bringing light and laughter into my life. We spent our weekends exploring the city, visiting art galleries, and hiking in nearby parks. Her positivity and creativity were infectious, and I found myself looking forward to our time together. One weekend, we decided to take a trip to a nearby lake. It was a beautiful, serene spot, surrounded by lush forests and clear blue waters. As we set up our picnic by the shore, I felt a deep sense of contentment. This was what life was supposed to feel like. Simple, joyful, and shared with someone who truly understood and cared. "Mike, look at this," Emma called, pointing to a family of ducks swimming by. "Aren't they adorable?" I smiled, watching the ducks paddle along the water. "They are. It's moments like this that make everything worthwhile." Emma looked at me, her eyes shining with warmth. "I'm glad we met, Mike. You've brought a lot of happiness into my life." "Same here, Emma," I replied, feeling a surge of gratitude. "You've helped me see that there's always a new beginning, even after the darkest times." As we sat there, Enjoying the beauty of the lake and each other's company, I realized that my journey of healing was far from over. There would still be challenges and setbacks, but I was no longer defined by the past. I had found strength within myself and hope for the future. The separation from Liz had been a painful but necessary step, allowing both of us to grow and heal in our own ways. We had learned valuable lessons about communication, trust, and the importance of self-care. While our marriage had ended, it didn't mean the end of happiness or love. Emma and I continued to build our relationship, taking things one day at a time. There was no rush, no pressure, just a mutual understanding and respect. And as the days turned into months, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and fulfillment. Life had a way of surprising you, I realized. Sometimes, the greatest growth came from the most unexpected places. And as I looked out over the lake, with Emma by my side, I knew that I was ready for whatever came next.